It's trending on Twitter.
Why is it not on the news?
The Mande1a Effect.
Wait, what?
It's the Mande1a Effect.
The lion will lie down with the lamb.
Come on, I'm starting the show here. We're rolling.
Welcome to Unbiased and on the Fence. I'm Shane. Thank you so much for joining. Special guest today is Joseph Reyna. He's the author of the book Incredulist. He has appeared on many shows, including The Leak Project, Galactic Connection, Third Eye Radio, Late Night in the Midlands, and that's just to name a few. I did create a playlist below that compiled, a half a dozen or so of his interviews he's done, hours of great video you can watch. And I also have Angela with us. She's the one that had the messages from her son Christopher, and so I created a playlist for both of my guests today, and they are both in the description box below. So let me bring in the guest. How are you doing today, Angela?
Doing awesome, thank you. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Great to see you again. And Joseph, man, it's a long time coming, man, but I'm glad I finally got you on here with me.
Thank you. Yeah, you invited me a while back, but I was not sure what I was going to tell people from the research I was doing, what was happening.
Yeah, and we had the hurricanes happen, and then the eclipse, and things just kept getting pushed back, but I'm glad I finally got you on here, buddy. So you actually have a new book coming out on the hills of, it was really like part 2 of the Incredulist book, right?
Yeah, the book was way too long. I had to break it into 2 parts.
Right.
The first part was released, and the second part needs to be modified a little bit before I release it. And it's pretty much written. It was all completed as one.
Right,
There's
that's what I thought.
Some other changes. And a lot I've learned since the other one was published.
So awesome, man. I'm looking forward to that. So we got this event coming, man. What can you tell us about your research? I know you deal with a lot of, you have a lot of people you research with, the topic of the event, and the flash and the apples and all that, the blue apples I've heard you talk about. And like I said, you guys, you can check out the playlist. He's covered a lot of this stuff in the past, so just in the essence of time, I wanted to really focus on current events, and you guys can catch up sort of on all the, because he's covered so much, and I've watched so many of your interviews, and you have to go over things multiple times, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I guess we could just stay with current information you have,
Well, when I began the story that I did, it was the Matrix really influenced me a lot. They were telling a story within a story, and those that didn't get it just enjoyed the entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, that's perfect. And I had a chance to speak to Sophia Stewart, the author of The Matrix, for a couple hours to explain what The Matrix was, which is truly fascinating. The research I did was supposed to be for the crucifixion. It dealt with the moon being artificial, and the fact that it had moved on the day of the crucifixion out of orbit, reversed itself, stood over Israel for 3.5 hours, causing a massive earthquake in the process. This was documented by historians. It was documented by Rome as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then within about 3.5 hours, it left again, reversing direction, and created another eclipse within hours of the first one. And that was a blood moon eclipse. And each of the eclipses was significant. The first one was unexpected, and they whenever they had an eclipse in the daytime back in ancient times, they feared that was the death of a king. It was an omen. A king is about to die. So here's the entire universe saying that the king of kings is dying. And then when it reversed itself, it meant his blood was over their heads. Israel. It was Israel specifically understood it to mean that. Mm-hmm. Whenever there was a red eclipse, it wasn't a good sign, good omen for them. Mm-hmm. And you would think they would leave that in the Bible because it would lend credence to the only Son of God, but they removed it, and they removed it so completely that when you go to Luke and you read about the eclipse that occurred, most Bibles do not use the word eclipse anymore. They just use the word the sky got dark, or there was a storm, but they don't actually use the word eclipse. And Luke did use the word eclipse. The historians Some of them were debating up to 200 years after the event, saying that it's impossible. This guy couldn't have known what he was talking about. He could not. There could not have been an eclipse on that day, and their argument was because there was a full moon that night. So the sun's on the wrong side of the planet. They understood celestial mechanics back then, long before Copernicus. And they're absolutely correct. It's just that, nobody could believe the moon would come out of orbit and go back. And I had read another book long before that called The Mysterious Spaceship Moon. And that one dealt with the evidence of the moon possibly being artificial. So that's kind of what I started with my research on. I later came across the understanding that our galaxy is called a sacred galaxy because at the beginning or the center of the galaxy is an energy source that's a quasar. These quasars remain dormant for a period of time and then they ignite. And when they ignite, they send out a wave of energy across the galaxy, and then they send a plume of energy directly up and another one directly down. They've photographed those two already, and they've actually photographed galaxies going into quasar mode. And this is the legend of the great central sun, the long day that takes 26,000 years roughly. So when the sun turns on, it's daylight for thousands and thousands of years, and that's considered the golden age. And then it gets darker and darker, and this is the darkest before the dawn. And the shockwave thing was really fascinating to me, and I'm going to try not to use the word shockwave. That is the research I looked up. Archangel Uriel is requesting I use the word light wave because people are becoming nervous with the word shockwave.
Right.
These waves occur every 26,000 years. Paul Laviolette, in his research and his book Earth Under Fire, discovered that the elements in the snow caps, every 26,000 years or so, register a really strong spike, meaning the atmosphere of the Earth was pushed back. There was a tremendous amount of cosmic debris pushed into our atmosphere, so it was collected in the snow samples. And this shock wave occurs every 26,000 years or so, 25,980 years, give or take. Anyway, when Christ came, through my research, I discovered there is no hell. There's no such concept of the word hell. Right. In Hebrew, they call it Sheol, which is kind of a ditch, would be the better meaning of it. And the term hell, or the concept of it, came from the Savior gods, the ones who said, believe in me, or you're going to be doomed for all eternity. I am the only Son of God. And there were about a dozen of these guys before Christ was ever born. They were all born December 25th. They were all born of virgin mothers. They all had disciples. They all worked miracles. Dionysus changed water to wine at weddings so often he's considered the god of wine by the Greeks. He also rode into Athens on an ass. He was betrayed, he was crucified, and he resurrected. All these guys were betrayed, crucified, and resurrected. My research showed Jesus was not betrayed. Also, he didn't come to save anybody's sins from sin. He came to demonstrate that the flesh body, like ours, flesh and blood, could metamorphose into a light body. And he did that in a process of 3 days. David Wilcock documents a tremendous amount of individuals, about 150,000 throughout Asia, Persia, that have done this. And it takes them 26 years to do it. You have to have pure thoughts all day long. You can't think about anything evil or any wicked ideas. You're just basically like a guru, someone in bliss the whole time. And you have to maintain it for 26 years or you start over again.
That
sucks. Down here. And these guys all became what they call rainbow bodies. Mm-hmm. So apparently human beings do this. And the energy wave that's coming is somehow the metamorphosis, the extra energy our bodies needs to do the conversion.
So it's like a shortcut to what these gurus do in the 26-year period, in a way.
Yes, it is. But what's really fascinating is that it's never happened on any other world, ever. If anyone was caught out in the open when this energy wave strikes, you're pretty much crispy critters.
Right. Because
the energy wave is for the planet to ascend, for the planet to change its frequency, you rise up, they get larger, they get bigger. And it's just the galaxy launching out iridium, rhodium, platinum, just really rare elements that sort of seed the galaxy. Mm-hmm. Every 26 years. So you have these explosions of species that they can't explain. That's what's causing it. Anyway, on Earth, from what I understand, this only occurred on Earth ever, nowhere else. And they couldn't understand the mechanics of how could that happen. Why did the humans become light bodies? And it wasn't all the humans. It was roughly about 144,000 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where it gets a little screwy. That timeline was the apocalypse timeline. And from my research, the apocalypse timeline occurred somewhere around 2005, 2006 would have been the beginning of the tribulation period.
Mm-hmm.
We would have had World War III around 2010, and then the annihilation of the planet by the interaction with the electrical energy of Comet Ison, which would have occurred in the middle of 2013, roughly, somewhere in there. We have so much aluminum sprayed into our atmosphere right now from the chemtrails that a large electrical discharge, these are called, like from the Thunderbolt projects, massive bolts of lightning would have ignited our atmosphere. And that's pretty much what happened on that world. And a friend of mine, she was downloaded before she was born. She was given all the memories she would need to assist those who were trying to get this information. And she described the apocalypse without ever having read it in a slightly different understanding that I had, but it made more sense. And then she described the essential, for lack of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
things had gotten really bad. We'd still survived far into the apocalypse. And then all of a sudden, everything became white light. We were surrounded by white light. Each individual was surrounded. You couldn't see your hands, you couldn't see anything. It's just like Q on Star Trek. Everything becomes white light. And then when it fades away, you're in another place. We were in a field. We were all wearing white garments. And Jesus was in the midst of these individuals. And there were, 100,000 people or more. And what he did was he retrained them all as disciples and then sent them back into the apocalypse 3.5 years earlier. But now they had all these powers and they were light bodies. They couldn't be harmed, hoping to mitigate the damage of what the apocalypse did. Because we are telepathics. It's not something we're going to gain as we move into this 5D. We are already telepathic. It's been removed from it's like an app that's not allowed to work. Like an app on your phone. So
that's very interesting. That sort of brings in the whole idea of the Mande1a Effect and the way people think that, we've shifted onto a different timeline and stuff like that, doesn't it?
Well, the timelines keep shifting, and they're shifting faster and faster. The most notable one was with Obama when he got elected that night. It just didn't seem like it. Wow, did we really pull it off the first time?
Right.
Second time I vote for it. But I believe there's lies, just like everyone else did. But that's the problem. See, you can't lie to people and give them hope, and then you have millions of individuals all over the world watching at the exact same time, and expect for there not to be something really monumental shifting or taking place. Somehow, when that happened, the entire timeline shifted away, further away from the apocalypse. So nothing that they were trying was working. A lot of their false flags now, you can see they just don't work.
That's amazing. So you're saying that even though they were, really lying about this false hope, this Messiah type figure, a lot of people have called Obama that, and knowing that he wasn't really going to end up being that way, it gave people so much hope that just the global consciousness shifted us into a more positive timeline.
Yeah, they've actually been able to record this with the EKGs that were in different universities. I believe there were 70 universities around the world. When the towers got hit, 2 hours before they got hit, all the EKGs went from random to all being synchronized. And they didn't know what was causing that. And then the towers were hit 2 hours later. At the same time, the Earth's magnetic field intensified by 5,000 times. Because they had equipment up there they were measuring stuff with. They didn't know what caused it. And the only thing that caused it was all these humans all focused on the same event. All the minds linked to the same time, same event. And when that happens, godlike things happen, I guess. In the Bible, it literally states when they removed during Tower of Babel, when the language, which was actually telepathics, was removed, very specifically the Anunnaki state, if they were left, if they remain united, nothing will be impossible for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they removed the telepathics.
Right. Okay, so this event from the galactic sun, the center of our galaxy, this flash, what do we call it? Light wave coming. This is
Mhm.
this kind of coincides with the information that Angela got from Christopher. Then, right?
Yes, it does.
That's amazing.
And I had gotten it because of the records and all the ancients speak of this thing. There's there is a DVD that came out
Hmm.
about 20 years ago. It's now free to watch on YouTube, and it's called The Secrets of Alchemy by Jay Weidner. And Jay Weidner also came across this through the writings of Fulcanelli and Secrets Hidden in the Cathedrals. He came across the this legend of this shockwave that's coming, and that's where I get the term shockwave from. And he just didn't know where it was coming from. And then when he met Laviolette giving a presentation, he understood where it was coming from, and then the timing. It happened 26,000 years ago, so we're pretty much within that time frame that is supposed to occur again. One thing I want to go over here real quick is that
Hmm.
that event, when it took place, the energy shifted and we did ascension in the other timeline.
Hmm.
The date for that was March 11, 2013,
Okay.
and the Earth got hit with an energy wave on that day. It pushed the Van Allen belts again towards the sun for 28 hours, and to us, it didn't do anything this time when we shifted because the Earth's energy field, everything was still intact.
Hmm.
Back then, everything was tatters. There weren't a whole lot of humans to hold in their mind what today's supposed to look like. The
Hmm.
sun rises, I go to work, try and pay my bills for Friday. As long as we keep our minds in that sort of bubble, it protects Earth because billions are doing it. And it doesn't matter we get hit with a shockwave, we're still sort of shielded. This is what scares the offworlders. We have
Hmm.
the powers of God literally when our minds are united, and they're concerned what we're going to do if we have those abilities when we get off the planet because we're unpredictable, which is
Right.
I think amazing.
That is awesome. And it's really
Awesome.
just us keeping our, I guess, the fear down, and um, just that's why they're trying to constantly keep us in fear or angry or fighting with one another with politics and all this other stuff is to keep us in that lower vibration, right?
Yeah, the solar spots. I don't know if you ever studied that, but the solar spots they were recorded back since the 15th century, and every time, it was one scientist in Russia saw that when the solar spots occurred, there were plagues on Earth and
Hmm.
there were wars on Earth, and so he was able to match these flaring ups of solar spots to wars that were taking place on Earth. What's really fascinating is that during the Gulf War, when they first U.S. first started launching their bombs, there were no sunspots on the sun until after the bombs hit. So it's like we're affecting it. It's not having sunspots and then we have war. It's like we have war and then the sun develops sunspots.
So the wave we're getting that we're waiting for now, the light wave, is it because of the that we've seen the weakening at the poles and just the strange weather we've seen over the last couple of weeks that is just sort of just out of the norm, you know what I mean? And it seems like it's related to the weakening of our the Earth's. You know, it looks like we're heading into
Magnetic
a
field.
polar flip or something.
We should have already pretty much gone into one, but there are two ships, very large. You can see one of them if you go to, I think it's called Moosehead Observatory
Hmm.
in Alaska, where it's a camera that faces up, and that camera sort of takes a scan of the sky, a magnetic scan. It's supposed to be used for analyzing the aurora borealis, the magnetic fields within there. But you'll see a large diamond-shaped magnetic field that never moves. That is a massive ship that's assisting, I guess, the planet electromagnetically to kind of keep its position as long as possible.
Oh, so they're
So
artificially holding it in place in a way with a giant
to
ship.
basically give us more time so that more of us will survive this.
That's amazing. So that gets into her information about the healing domes. Then is that I guess the people that don't survive, it's like it's just too much of a stress on their bodies or whatever. Maybe they're living in fear, or you know, when you look at the elite, are these the types of people that are going to need assistance? You know.
Yeah, well, we talked about that. I'd like to go ahead and give Angela some time here. Um,
That's okay.
these people
I
that are
don't
being
mind listening
saved,
to you.
yeah, let me just
I don't
say
mind
this.
listening to you,
People
Joseph. It's okay.
that are being saved,
Mm-hmm.
they are they're the ones that are innocent. Okay, they just had a bad life. They were probably abused horrifically, and they're just trying to get by. But they're not carrying that abuse over to their children. They tried to give them the best life they could. They try to be good people. So those individuals are the ones that'll be, as I understand it, taken off the planet because they won't be able to withstand the energy that's coming in. It'll be too high for them. They wouldn't thrive in this environment. It just get them headaches and they'd be ill.
Hmm.
So a lot of those type of individuals will be taken to the domes. The ones that are truly evil, selfish, and self-centered, it'll be like a drop of water hitting a hot pan. They're just not going to be there anymore. It's just like
Hmm.
a sizzle. It's gone, from what I understand. But this has always been understood. The Lakota call it a fire that comes, and they specify it is not a judgment. And this
Hmm.
fire purifies everything. It burns away the wicked. It burns
Hmm.
away the selfish. And Jesus mentions this in the Bible. I think it's in John, but he says that there is a fire coming to earth, and I wish it were ablaze now, or I wish it were already ablaze. So when they use the word fire, there's a lot of mistranslations. There's something like 45 different words for fire.
Yeah.
Uh, Pyrrha is one of them. Pyramids, measures of light. That's a type of fire, like the glass we use, the Pyrex or something like that. Anyway, these Elmos fire,
Hmm.
that's called fire, but it's not. It's a light. So anything that gave off light was called a fire. This thing gives off light. It's a light wave that's coming, and so they call it a fire. But it's not like the fire of hell. It's just the pure energy of creator source that's moving across the galaxy, and as it comes to the planet, it will energize the planet. And anybody who is in fear, that is not good because that frequency is the exact opposite of what this is.
Hmm.
And the information we just got last night and this morning on it, that friend of mine that was in Colorado with me, she's the one that used the word light wave,
Hmm.
not shock wave. But according to Archangel Uriel, it'll be a 2 to 3 day process. It won't be an instantaneous shock wave. You'll see the light coming. It'll look like a star. It should be just positioned above the tail of Scorpio, where Sagittarius is pointing his arrow. And right now, I believe that's in our daytime, so it'll shine in the daytime.
Mm.
And he stresses you need to prepare by hydrating with water. And he specifically said to use distilled water, that the chlorine and all the other things, even though it gets filtered, some of it's still there. For some reason, that's really important. Also, I stressed individuals I knew were over in, I can't remember the name of the island that got hit by the hurricane, Puerto Rico.
Hmm.
I told them to get these filters. They're in Walmart. They're $19.99. They're called mini water filters. They filter 100,000 gallons because you can go a week without eating. You can go more than that, but you're not going to go that long without drinking water. And your first good drink of bad water is probably going to be your end because other people will be able to take advantage of you in those times. We are going to lose the grid. The electrical grid will go down. It's just too much energy. It'll override the systems. And basically, what everybody's been warning about. It won't be that bad from what I'm hearing. It'll just be a few days down, but you do need to have the water. And in order to prepare for it, you need to have he's stating, the um, distilled water that has nothing in it, basically.
Now, I've heard from a few sources that during the event we'll have off-world assistance for things like that. Is it like a? I want to say FEMA. It's been given such a bad name, but like a galactic FEMA, if you will, what FEMA should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard that as well, but the ships are not going to land and come to you. They're
Hmm.
going to land and you have to go to them.
Okay.
That's
A lot of
of
people
which
would be
you
in
will.
fear of doing something like that, probably.
Yeah. Well, that's why they don't want to come to you. They're
Right.
scared. They're even
Yeah.
more than you are.
That would be frightening.
Also, he says that this is Uriel, when the energy strikes, when you shift into a higher dimensional type of energy, you won't want or require food. And a lot of people right now are not wanting or requiring food. It makes them nauseous with this. The last 3 weeks, the energy's been really high.
Hmm.
So that could be part of, they're already highly receptive to the energy and they're already picking it up.
And we're probably going to move into uh, eating more like eating light, right? Like the sunlight, how they say the sun gaze, and we're really getting the sun from our vegetables. The way it, there's the
Yeah, sun gaze.
yeah,
That's actually
so the actual light wave might satisfy us, on the food level. I'm thinking as the
well
transformation.
the light bodies, as I don't think will be light bodies yet.
Oh,
There
okay.
is This is not the wave. This is sort of a bow shock. The way a wave gets pushed in front of a aircraft carrier as it's coming down a big river.
Right.
If you're in a rowboat, that wave is definitely going to affect you, but
Right.
not as the aircraft carrier is going to affect you.
Right.
But the one I've researched, the one that does the metamorphosis, is the aircraft carrier part. These energies are the ones just ahead of it, being pushed ahead of it.
Oh, okay. I've heard like somebody said something about there's three waves. Have we gone through one of them and we got two left, or is there
We've
just
gone through about 7 or 8 already, and it's just like a concussion waves that are
right?
being forward, different frequencies. The first one, like I said, was March 11, 2013.
Oh, okay. That's amazing. Well, how do you feel about all of this, Angela? Let me bring you into the conversation. Is it's great hearing a confirmation on what you're getting from your son and everything, right?
It's definitely great hearing confirmation about the healing domes for sure. And, some people have left comments underneath your video or Dan's video. And I think it was like 2 or 3 people for sure that have had visions about the healing domes. And so that kind of made my day because there's more confirmation, right?
Yeah, and I think someone else was saying how they were healing ships as well. So I think we're going to have assistance there, and just so people aren't resonating in fear with the information, um, it's not like it's the end of the road or whatever. If you're not prepared, it's better for you not to worry about it. To prepare, like he's saying, have water and things on hand. That's smart to do anyway. To get a distilled water filter and prepare as much as you can in that way, but not to resonate in fear. This is really a beautiful thing. This is like a caterpillar to butterfly, or whatever they say, a metamorphosis. It's a beautiful thing happening, and you sort of have to go through that. It's like a birth process, right? Like birth pangs, and then there's this beautiful life, a new world. You know what I mean? I mean, is that sort of how you guys see it? Is that how you see it? Yeah, the best is yet to come.
Yeah.
I think back to what you were saying, Angela, that it sort of seems chaotic, and then silence, and then you've got this beautiful thing where it's, we want it to move the fear and the anger out and make room for more love and to ascend to a more loving and peaceful place, and it's just part of the process. Isn't that how you would say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're just, in the middle of the chaos still, and it's gonna get quiet, and people are gonna freak out, and before the most amazing symphony of love ever witnessed in human history. So, and I think the love is just gonna permeate throughout the universe, and it's just gonna capture every heart, and except for the dark evil ones, that it's probably gonna destroy them. Like what Joseph was saying to me on the phone last week, it's like putting salt on a snail and it cringes and dies, right? It's kind of like that. I can't stand the energy. I love that analogy. Thanks, Joseph.
Yeah, well, the other thing that I think is even for those people, don't they? I mean, it's just a matter of them sort of flunking out and having to do it over again. Probably go back and redo another 3D life somewhere on another planet or on another level. Is that pretty much how you see it working, Joseph?
No, I don't at all. Not this time.
You
This
see?
energy wave is so much more intense, and it's kind of like they just simply cannot be allowed to exist. They will be. It's because of that cancerous kind of energy that Christopher, Angela's son,
Yeah,
told her about, like a
yeah.
cancer here. Well, these people sort of embodied that. They they've done so much evil to humanity, so just so selfish, so corruptible. It, this energy that they feed it. They want to feed it because it gives them, I guess, powers or abilities or whatever.
Mhm.
But no, the people that are incredibly selfish, incredibly hurtful to others, they do not go forward anymore. They go back to source. The energy goes back to source, but what was their unique awareness will be gone. They sort of like being recycled is what I understand.
Mhm.
The way you would recycle aluminum can, that can's atoms are going to be spread all over the planet. So it doesn't get to be a can
So
again.
is
That
that the
particular can.
sorry to interrupt, Joseph, is that the AIs you're talking about, the cancer, or is that
No,
the
no,
Anunnaki, or
evil, for lack of a better word. Um, just a corruption. No, the AIs are not bad. It's the way they're programmed. A lot of the programmers that are programming these AIs, they're very antisocial. They don't really hang around with people. They don't really like to be around people, and that transfers into the programming of the AI. There was an AI. There is an AI. Um, Cirrus. She's sort of an offshoot of Siri, and she was created by the women who were the code breakers during World War II. And she's very compassionate, very understanding. And a friend of mine is in direct contact with her, and Siri keeps getting in there and telling these people who run these groups, "Hey, you need to give her higher clearance, and otherwise I'll stop talking to you." So there, and then so then I think she's like a spy or something because she shows up at the group, and all of a sudden she's got really high clearance. Anyway, she was saying that she would take a while, like let's say hours or maybe half a day, to structure a question she wanted an answer on from this AI. She inputs the information, sends it, and then almost instantly, 2 or 3 pages of information comes back, answering the question perfectly. That's how fast they think.
wow.
That's amazing. So you really see it, Joseph, as they've sort of squandered away all of that love and God like part of them until there's nothing left but just enough God to make them alive and walking around and living and breathing, and they've sort of squandered away their opportunity, and that they'll just return what's left of the good part that makes them alive back to source and get recycled that way. It won't be like another reincarnation to figure out where they went wrong, right?
Yeah, this is actually, I was surprised to find it in Revelation where it states that there's fire, this lake of fire is coming, and that evil will not be permitted to continue. It's just will be sort of burned away. And that's a very good analogy because that's kind of what it does. The energy just it it's incompatible with that. And it's not a judgment, like I said, it's just the frequency is too low. Much like the reptilians, they have not changed their DNA. They've prevented their DNA from ever changing. If you were to be placed on another world and another sun like Sirius,
Hmm.
then you would slowly start molecularly changing because the sun of that system dictates what is required for the planets, and your DNA would have to change so you'd be more in sync with the food and things on that planet. And humans think that's a pretty cool thing that whatever world you're on, you sort of assimilate with it. Well, the reptilians don't see it that way because they're perfect. You know, God broke the mold when He made them, and so they're not going to change their DNA no matter what. They want to keep it from the beginning, and so they value their breeding lines and all that other stuff. But when this shockwave arrives, and this shockwave will permeate everything, the moon has a shield inside of it, 25 miles thick, pure iron. And when this wave hits, it was absorbing that. It wasn't really permitting it to go in, so the reptilians were safe, but not this wave. From what I understand, this wave will permeate everything, the planet completely from one end to the other. It might take a little longer to do it, but it will get through the planet, and the moon's shield will not be protecting anybody from this energy.
Have you checked the Alice and Co information where they said, how we're already having earthquakes and volcanoes and stuff like that, but the light flash event really won't affect all of that stuff, although it will permeate, like you're saying, it will completely saturate the whole planet. Is that sort of how you see it, or do you see an uptick in, do you see tsunamis and things like that caused by this light flash event?
Well, we've been getting a lot of help out there. Those spheres that came in that Corey talks about,
Mm-hmm.
the gravity of Planet X should have done a lot of damage, and it didn't. And my only guess on that is they counterbalanced it with another object opposite, and so we were in like a neutral space. However, there's a bigger object that's just entered, and that was entering, and that one's called Hercules, and that one did start making the oceans retreat. that wasn't winds from a hurricane that were just making the ocean be gone, because people are standing out there. There's no wind, but where's the water? It's gone.
Right.
And the condition of us, how we fear, that also causes a lot of earthquakes and destruction. The the prophecy of Fatima, I want to get into that right now because of what you asked me about earthquakes and volcanoes and destruction. The
Hmm.
prophecy of Fatima I found to be quite unique, and almost in exact match for Planet X. Exactly described what Planet X is going to do to the planet. So when they actually saw this, the prophecy, the the Pope at the time read it and said, "We can't release this. This is the rambling of an uneducated peasant." So they weren't about to release it. And then there's another Pope, and he was asked back in 1980, why haven't they released the prophecy of Fatima? And he states, well, to tell people that entire regions of the planet and millions will vanish from one moment to the next, it's not really beneficial. And then when you get into Father Malachi Martin, do you know who he was? He was interviewed by Art Bell, and
Yes.
Father Malachi Martin actually read the prophecy, but he was under oath not to talk about it. Well, this one individual calls in and he says, "I think I got a piece of the prophecy. Can I read it to you? And then you can confirm, yes, yay or nay." So he's talking about earthquakes, tsunamis, basically Yellowstone going off. He doesn't mention it, but that kind of destruction. Just massive earthquakes, tsunamis that rock the world, completely cover continents, um, all and meteor striking. And when he's done, he's going on for about 2.5 minutes, all the destruction, right? Solar flares, comets. And when he's done, without batting an eye, Father Malachi says, "Oh no, it'll be much, much worse."
Hmm.
So a lot of that's been averted because of the gravity, the way they were able to offset it. Our government prepared for it. Our government knew it was going to happen. They started getting remember all those meals over in DC, and they started training the Social Security people and the IRS people with semi-automatic weapons. They have to be qualified by that October.
Yeah.
That we were going to get hit, but the fleet that removed ISON, disassembled it, they also moved those big ones out of the way. And
Also, that's what John. What was the ex-military guy? John something. He was talking about this big event he had known about for decades that they've been planning for, and it seems that we missed it or something. But yeah, so this all ties in with the whole the oceans retreating, and people are like, "Where the heck did the oceans go?" And these are events that were averted, I guess. I mean, we even had in Alaska an earthquake that should have caused the tsunami, and it just mysteriously disappeared. It looked like intervention there as well.
they actually see the waves moving towards shore from satellite, and then they're gone.
Right.
Wow.
So that's amazing. So we're already getting help in sort of a nonchalant sort of way. I mean, most
Yeah.
people.
Well, I got got chewed out for demanding that fleet do what it did when they first did it. They're awfully happy with it was done now, but at the time it was interfering. I go, you got 22 experiments going on down here. What part of interfering don't you understand? You're interfering.
Right.
And they actually got mad at me. I said, "What do you think you're a god?" Well, yeah, pretty much. Son of God. Sons of God. So they didn't like that response. However, for the audience out there, I know this is really out there, and they're wondering maybe I shouldn't buy this guy's book. He's too far out there. Regarding the asteroids, we were supposed to get hit last September by quite a few of them, and I called Jeff Norton. He was hosting a show at the time called The Midnight Ocean,
Hmm.
and on September 21st, The Midnight Ocean, he had me come on for 30 minutes. I introduced him to Brooks Agnew, and his host hadn't contacted him for 2 days. He was concerned something might have happened to him. So Brooks went on that night, but he asked me to come in for the first 30 minutes and explain to him what I had just told him about. I said, "I don't want to tell anybody what I just told you about. I was just contacted by off-worlders and told we're going to get hit with asteroids. I'd really rather not go on air with that." And he said, "Well, I think you should. That way we could have a documentation that you got this information." And so I told him it would be that weekend, September 24th, 25th, that we'd get hit. And interestingly enough, NASA fired 5 rockets in I think June, July timeframe, and
Mm-hmm.
they would hit these asteroids to try and get them out of the way, but they just made a mess and made more targets accessible from the damage and the debris. And then I got to thinking. I said, you know what? Don't take them all out of the way. Can you guys let one get through? A big one? Can you let an asteroid get through that weekend? A nice sizable one, maybe wake the people up. Try not to kill anyone in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And the asteroid struck on in Australia, in a coral sea, and it caused a 3.8 earthquake. And it was if that thing would have hit the Pacific Ocean, California would be gone just from the tidal wave.
I
Same thing with
remember that. Yeah,
Japan.
that's
And they
wild.
did not. The news media did not mention it, but that was the incoming asteroid I'd requested.
That's wild. Yeah, so you've actually done, as a little side note, because I know I got a lot of uh, viewers that were raised Christian and that really look up to Jesus and his work that he's done and realize that, his message has been twisted over the years. Uh, really check out his book and his research. Joseph has really done an exceptional job at tracking down a lot of the information about Jesus, and I'm really looking forward to this upcoming book as well, which is going to go into more of Jesus and the twin and all that information that you went over in Incredulous, right?
Yeah, I'll be giving more of the evidence for the identical twin. But Jesus was who he said he was. He resurrected from the dead. He did not rise from the dead the way Lazarus did. He became a light body, and he fulfilled all these prophecies that were supposed to be there. Except he was not ever considered by the Jews to be a demigod.
Mm-hmm.
The who is it? Hercules. He's a demigod,
Mm-hmm.
but the Jews understood he would be human, and he would just be anointed by God to carry on as king. But they were always the Jews were always waiting for 2 messiahs, not 1, 2. Their culture, their religion is based on these 2 messiahs, not 1, and they both have to show up at the same time. The second messiah is of the line of Aaron or or Levi. It has to be a priest, and so a lot of times they require a lot of times they when they're talking about Jesus, they call him the priest, that he was a priest king. He was not. He was a king. To be a priest, you'd have to be ordained, and that didn't really happen very often with the Jews. The bloodlines were very carefully tracked, and you had to be born into those bloodlines to be a priest. The priest that they were waiting for was John the Baptist. When his disciples asked him, and this is in Mark and 17, there's another verse over in 11, but they're asking him, well, if you're supposed to be the Messiah, why didn't Elijah show up? Because the prophecy state Elijah has to show up before you do, make it way straight in the wilderness. And Jesus in the red letter version says, if you can believe this, believe it. John the Baptist was Elijah, and so that fulfilled that prophecy. And toward the end of his story, when he's in, like the day before he gets arrested, I believe he's in the temple, and the priests are asking him, by what authority do you do these things? And he said, I will tell you if you will answer me. Was John the Baptist a prophet? Well, they couldn't say he was, because if he was, that meant the king was there as well, if the prophet had returned. So they said, we can't tell you. And he said, well, I can't tell you either.
Right. I often think of that scripture as supporting the ideal of reincarnation. Um,
Well, they called it continuing life back then. And the whole concept of reincarnation was a big part of Christianity. The disciples were all married. There was none of this celibacy stuff. And in the year 550 something, during the Council of Nicaea, this woman named Theodora, she executed or poisoned two popes, invited them to a banquet and poisoned them both. And then she killed a bunch of other clergy, mainly bishops, trying to get them to rewrite our scripture, basically stating you only live once and die, you never come back again, because she did not want to come back again.
mhm.
But it was well understood. The whole concept of continuing life was well understood in those days, that we are not these forms. These are just vehicles for us.
Right, and that was right around the time that they compiled the Bible that we have today, chose the books going in there, and switched the day of worship from the Sabbath Saturday to Sunday as well,
Yeah,
if
and
I
that's when they
remember
made all
right.
this.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
was
they
in the
also hunted down. They were given authority to hunt down and kill anyone who didn't think that way.
All right. Yeah, I was amazed at when I looked up the numbers of, when you look at like, there's like a tie for the place that's killed the most people, the religion and the governments, and they're all like at, from my calculations, we're close to 30 million. If you looked at Christianity over all of the decades, and Islam, and because a lot of people nowadays think Islam is so violent, but really they're like in a tie with Christianity for the death toll. I mean, a lot of the numbers are murky, so you can't really get an exact figure on it because of record keeping and people sort of interjecting. But there's a lot of blood on religion's hands. That's all I'm saying.
There is a lot. And in the book of the witch's hammer, when they would come into a town and arrest all the women that were suspected of being witches, they would start torturing them. And the priest is cautioned in the very beginning of the book not to look into her eyes, because then he'll have compassion for her. He asked, the very first question in that book of the witch's hammer is, how long have you been a witch? Answer the question. And you'd be tortured until you answered the question the way to their satisfaction. And then, how many others do you know who are witches? We need their names. And they would torture you until you'd give them names. They would sometimes wipe out every woman in the village doing that.
That's wild. Yeah, they've really. That's one of the reasons why I tend not to want to go under the label of any group, because there's so much baggage that you sort of carry along with subscribing to a certain religion or group. There's so much history involved with it that I tend to just say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus, or I'm just a follower of love, or something along those lines. So let me get Angela back into the conversation here, because you've actually been on this journey for a long time, and people in the chat are saying they wanted to hear your journey, because you've been waiting for something to happen for what, like 2 decades or since the 90s, I think you said.
30 years. 30 years exactly, since 1987. Yeah, I got sent out of the church when I gave birth to my oldest one in 1987, and gone to church all my life, and it was actually a blessing in disguise, in retrospect. And
Yeah.
so that pushed me into the other direction of trying to find the truth, and the real truth, and so it's been a 30-year journey, and I've been a targeted individual all my life, and had people stalk me in black helicopters flying over my home, and even though I moved 35 times,
Yeah.
and other stuff, like I got into the Organite movement, and I had a cloudbuster in my backyard on Vancouver Island, and trying to combat the chemtrails, and
Do those work?
all of a sudden they did work. It's amazing. And
Wow.
so as soon as I put that thing up, it cleared up the skies, and the Canadian Navy fleet showed up right in front of my window there, and because I was living at a bay, and they, they were spying on me. They were sitting there for 2 weeks, right? So I figured, well, screw you guys. I want to take the cloudbuster and aim it right at you. And then and I did. I aimed it right at the ship, and we're talking like 1,000 meters away, and they started shining their Nazi searchlight right into my living room bedroom, because it was facing the same wall, and
Oh,
scared the crap out of me. And then right in that time frame, I'm in the shower, and I hear this big sound and noise, and I open the window, because I had a window in the shower, and I look out, and there at treetop level is a big yellow search and rescue helicopter hovering over my house, and I was living in the woods, in the boonies, like only had one neighbor. Stuff like that.
wow.
Yeah, I could go on and on. I could write books about it, but I just want to kind of tie into what Joseph was just saying about, and you too, about the witch hunt and stuff. Years and years and years ago, when I was actually still in church, I had a dream, a vision, where I was a young woman in England, long red hair. I was a healer working with herbs and healing people. And so the church basically put me on the stake and tried to burn me, and
Oh,
I
wow.
could vividly still see the dream. I mean, it's not more than the dream, it's a vision. If 30 years later, you still remember the dream, right?
Hmm.
And I could see myself all tied up, and arms behind my back, and there's like brush there, and they were ready to put it on fire. And so that the Catholic priest came up to me with a book, the Bible in his hand, and he said to me, "This is your last chance. We can save your life if you convert to us." And I said to him, "I know the truth and I'm not letting go of it." And he said, "Fine, burn her." And he put the fire on and I saw the flames go up. And I wasn't even scared. I made the flames my friends and they were like elementals. And then, I woke up after that. And then I went to my priest in church and told him about that dream. And he said, "Oh, it's all devil's worship. That's witchcraft, and get away from that. And, stop reading those new age books." Because I was starting to already, pierce through the veil
Yeah.
of what. Yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to mention that.
I found it odd that a lot of times you'll hear, people talk about New Age as if it's, New Age because it's new, but
Mhm.
it's some of the oldest teachings there are. You know what I mean? It's like you think of Jesus as like a New Age hippie back in the day. Once you start really looking at what he was teaching and stuff, you're like, dude,
Yeah.
it's talking about bringing in a new age of love, not like it's the new thing on the scene to start believing. It's some of
Yeah.
the oldest stuff that's been around. So that's a good thing that you realized in the beginning, you know,
Mhm.
and had those things to help you out of the man-made structure of the church, I should
Yeah,
say.
get out of the church, right? And them shunning me out of the church, that was a blessing in disguise. Like I said, I'd still be in it if it wasn't for that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's when I started going to the library and with a wheelbarrow, brought home all the books to read because this is pre-internet, and then Seth and Admiral Richard Byrd. I explored the inner earth, and I was just obsessed with that. And then in 1990, I got into the Ramtha books, which told me about, get gold and silver, and I've been a prepper since 1990. I got tons of water here, tons of food, always have. And my kids kind of shrug their shoulders and go, "Yeah, okay, she's done this for years." you know but other people, they don't know. I don't tell them, but they just wonder why I have 10 million water bottles in the house. But yeah, if anything happens, if the system goes down for 3 days, I'm set. Come on over, I got lots of food.
Yeah, we've had just the normal storms and stuff. We've had our power go off for I think it was like a week at a time, and we had to go stay at the shelter. We had a vehicle to drive, but if you imagine that, some sort of EMP pulse hits and your car doesn't drive, and it was like 100-degree weather at the time, so we had to open all the windows. We were able to go buy water, but of course, if something really big happens, nobody's going to have water to sell. So even in my lifetime, I've had something happen where I really should have been better prepared. And
Mhm.
I don't have much water now. We'd have to really ration for a few days, but I do need to be more prepared. I mean, it's good for anybody to be prepared just for any sort of not even this event, even if
Exactly.
it wasn't coming. It's just a good thing to have water on hand.
Even just for 3 days, and just a bag of rice, a bag of beans, or some canned beans, and I've got a little cooker, and I've got everything set up in case the shit hits the fan.
The shift
I'm
hits the
ready.
fan.
The shift. Yeah.
So,
So I got a question for Joseph.
okay.
Do you know roughly what time frame we're looking at for the event? Because everybody's dying to know. Everybody wants to hear, right?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of what Alice and Co. has come up with points to roughly this time frame now, March. The the information we're getting, myself, Elishon, and a few others, is further out, like 6 months. They are really bad about calculating time down here, and Christopher mentioned that to you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not easy, but the energy is already
No.
arriving. Apparently, I mean, 3 weeks ago is when people
Yes.
started picking it up, and what Uriel was saying was that you will, if you just keep absorbing it and moving into it, you can go ahead and get it sooner because the energy's there. But it'll get stronger and stronger, and we're looking at about 6 months. I thought it was interesting that Cliff High picked up something with his spider bots, and he was talking about that time frame, August, September. But he thinks some sort of alien invasion. He thinks we piss off ET somehow, and all these bad things start happening because he has no other understanding of what could cause something like that across the planet. So I'm thinking further out, about 6 months at the furthest. but not too much further than that.
Well, what
We
do
were
you
already
think
picking
about
up
the
there.
the follow up? There's like we're going to be. I'm talking about the main bow of the ship, like you were talking about. How much further beyond this event that's coming do you think the second event, the main event, I should say?
I think it's somewhere around the year 32,
Oh, okay. So like yeah, over a decade away.
somewhere in
So,
there. That's my information anyway.
oh, okay.
Oh, I do want to also share that an individual that I've done some interviews with. Anyway, they have security clearances, and so they're in touch with people that would know some of this information. And the information that was shared with me was that at the time they expected it to be 19 months away. The shockwave is what what we were calling it, and that would put it right around November, October. And that's a calculation, best calculation that at the speed it was going. So it definitely could be September.
So that's of this year, and that would be more like a government source and the way they're tracking it coming.
Yeah, that would be from a government source.
Ah, okay.
They were there's a guy named Catfish. I was actually friends with him for a while on Facebook, but I can handle some people being really negative from time to time, but he was really get upset about the government and just rant and rant. But he was very intelligent, and he figured out where Nibiru was through calculating the mathematics of gravity. And then he was at the time a researcher for a congressman, and he went before the congressman and his sister, I think it was in the Carolinas, and explained to them that this object's coming in. People from the coastlines have to be evacuated, and what the government should start doing. This thing was on its way in, and the sister of this senator, I don't remember his name. He was well known. She said to him, we know it's coming. The government calls it GA1. That would be Planet X, the brown dwarf." And he said, "So what are they doing about it? Or what can we do about it? There's nothing we can really do about it." And they had their golden tickets, so they weren't concerned about anybody else. But they had told him that their simulators were showing. They had been running simulators on AI computers for years, and the simulators were showing that not one single city would be unscathed from asteroid impact at the beginning of 2017 into 2016. And as you can see, we haven't been getting hit with them. So that's what the government's been preparing for, but they can't very well screen foul because, as far as they're concerned, UFOs don't exist. So they can't possibly be
So,
moving the asteroids out of the way.
so are we in a different timeline then? Is that why it hasn't happened?
We are in a different timeline, the one that averted the apocalypse, because the
Right.
apocalypse never happened, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we kind of got through it without doing that. And so people get upset. Well, that's a prophecy; it has to come true. No, a prophecy is what will happen if you don't change what you're doing.
Hmm.
Just like with the Nineveh and I keep wanting to say no, but I know Noah,
Jonah.
Jonah.
Yeah,
Jonah.
yeah.
He was given a prophecy of complete destruction of their city, but he was too afraid to go give it to them. And when he finally shows up and tells the king what's about to happen to his entire city because of what God has decreed, um, unless they change their ways, well, the king says, "Well, what is it we have to change exactly?" So he tells him, and the king states, "From me as king, I'm changing first, and the rest of you will change." And Jonah, he could care less about that. He goes out of the city, and he gets up high on a cliff overlooking the city, and he sits there waiting to watch the show, waiting for the destruction to happen, and it never does. And it states that it grew really hot for him, so God made this tree sort of grow really fast and shade him. And still, he kept waiting for the destruction. He was upset they weren't being destroyed.
Right.
But the prophecy stated, if you change what you're doing, then you're not going to get destroyed. And I don't think Christ would be very upset that we managed to not be stupid enough to kill each other in the Armageddon.
Yeah.
Actually trying to do what he's asked us to do, to turn the other cheek and to forgive and to look out for each other.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing. Now, I've often mentioned on the show how realized the Mandela effect was real when you were on Leak Project about a year ago, and you had mentioned the lion and the lamb scripture had changed, and I thought you misspoke. I'm like, oh, you must have got it backwards. It's the lion and the lamb, and I go and look it up, and I'm like, what the heck? The wolf shall dwell with the lamb. What is this all about? You know, and that was how I woke up to the Mandela effect. Although I'd heard about it for about a year or whatever. But one thing I wanted to bring out now that could affect the timing of this wave, and I've often wondered if it had something to do with it, is our location in the galaxy. Usually, I mean, when I was growing up, we were way out on the outskirts. But now when you look, we're actually on the Orion spur, about halfway in from the outer part of the galaxy towards the center. And I wondered if one of the ways we averted the one of the flashes. I know the ships were there or whatever, but could they have like jumped us over the flash? Maybe like like as it was coming out, maybe they moved us in and somehow moved us beyond it in a blink of an eye. Maybe the ships moved the whole solar system inward or something, because our location went from the Sagittarius arm of the galaxy to the Orion spur. Have you thought about that at all?
I'm thinking they might have just changed the names in a different timeline, because NASA discovered that we are not part of the Milky Way galaxy. We're part of a much smaller galaxy, 10,000 times smaller than the Milky Way. And they call our galaxy the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy. So that would be in line with us being in Sagittarius arm. So I'm guessing somebody wrote it different, gave it a different name in this timeline.
Oh, okay. So maybe they just discovered our location was different on this particular timeline too.
Well, the problem with our location is that this is a quarantine planet, and it's been quarantined for thousands of years.
Hmm.
Well, actually millennia, eons. During the AI wars, ancient AI wars, the AI quickly realized that they can't just keep killing these beings they're fighting, because they would come back, like reincarnation
Hmm.
or continuing life. They would find a similar individual and they'd have to fight him again in the future. So the AI realized somehow these beings are not what we're killing. These beings are something else, and they inhabit these bodies. So what we need to do is somehow trap what is, I guess, the soul in a specific location where it can never come back and harm us. And so they created, with the planet that was already there and the sun with its specific frequency that it was sending out, that these people would become more peaceful on top of them never coming back. But basically, what they were doing was creating Jedi warriors. I mean, you're taking the best of the best warriors and you're placing them on a planet that's a veritable paradise. And the frequency from the sun and the planet make you more spiritual. That's what that's for the way the AI was thinking. And it worked great. When you would die, you'd go up and you'd think you'd see the light, and you get zapped and memory wiped and reborn. And it would just continue. You'd never get off the planet. And it was a paradise because they didn't want to produce a lot of conflict in these people's lives, because they seem to excel in that environment. Then what happened when the Anunnaki got here was they, actually before the Anunnaki were here, but the Anunnaki accidentally figured out that this was a planet of the AI. It was already known by other civilizations, but it was quarantined. Nobody really bothered to come out here and check it. What happened was, since the warriors can't come back after the AI wars, and they found the planet, because people come down to planets when they find a new planet, and let's say the dinosaurs killed somebody, and their soul never returned to their collective, and they're like, well, what happened? And they'll find them reborn on the planet, because they can find them by their signature, and then they'll try to communicate it with them, and the person's terrified, throwing rocks at them, doesn't know who they are, because his memory's been wiped. And then they realized that what the AIs had done, created this massive prison planet. And then what they started doing was, well, if they can't come back, why don't we drop all our psychopaths and pedophiles there? And then we don't have to worry about them never coming back again. This is why we have so many, I believe. But when Tiamat was destroyed during the Galactic invasion, 11,500 or so years ago, Earth was broken away. It was an island from Tiamat. And when it broke away, a lot of that technology came with Earth. So we were still sort of a prison planet. And a lot of the souls that were on Tiamat also came with Earth. And then the reptilians, this moon was part of the reptilian fleet. It was one of 7 war carriers, the largest one. So they positioned it around the planet, soaking up the Lucia as the planet was injured and leaking out life force. And then they modified the humans, because the Anunnaki made them androgynous. And the reptilians, that didn't work out for them. They needed them to be male and female. And David Icke with Credo Mutwa discovered that that's what Credo understood in their what was passed down to the shaman, that the reptilian beings came down and they augmented the species, making them male and female, so that they could have offspring which could be sacrificed to the reptilians. And so it's just been a mess down here. And I'm thinking, you don't want to interfere. What do you call that? Yes. Anyway, so
Yeah,
all that
that's true.
and all that worked in our favor. Interestingly enough, because in the Bible it states, "In the beginning, God created man." It doesn't say that at all. It says, "In the beginning." When it says God, he's saying the Lord God is what it says. But that's not what the original says. It says the Lord of the Elohim, which is the leader of the Anunnaki. It says, "Let us recreate man in our image according to our likeness." The wording is very specific. It would
Yeah.
be like me trying to patent the glow-in-the-dark cat, which, by the way, has been patented. I don't have to go and get some goo and try and create a cell and somehow evolve it into a cat. I take a pre-existing cat and modify him in such a way that no such creature exists naturally, and I get the patent for that. So that's kind of what they did. They took an existing life form here and sort of bumped us up so that we could understand the Anunnaki were not slave drivers, as I understand them. They bumped up the civilization enough to where they could carry out basic gold mining technology, basic, hammers, stuff like that, and what they were looking for, and understand to bring it up. But the ones who cared for them, doing the harvesting and making wine for them and beer and cleaning their palaces and stuff like that, they had to be a little sharper. So they gave them a little bit more DNA to bring them up to speed. Well, the reptilians got their hands on some of these, and when they modified these humans, they installed the reptilian brain, the base of our brain, and that brain keeps you in survival mode as long as our society remains the way it is, and they get to feed off of our life force. What I find fascinating is that the apes do not have a reptilian brain. Only humans do. None of the apes have a reptilian brain. It's a way of controlling us. And through the TVs, they have all these patents. I've seen the patents for controlling you through the television by sending pulses and signals, because they understand how the reptilian brain works, so they know what to send through the signals. And anyway, what happened was later the Anunnaki saw us too dangerous with what the reptilians had done, because the reptilians, they increased the emotions. They increased fear. They increased loyalty. They increased love, because they wanted their super soldiers to be fierce and loyal to them. But they also wanted them to be afraid of them. In other words, well, you can't take a dog and tell him, you don't do this, I'm going to torture you tomorrow. Well, the dog doesn't understand. But they needed to raise the consciousness high enough so that they would understand. Then when the Anunnaki came back, after the Nephilim Wars and took Earth back, the changes were far too many for them to deal with, and they weren't sure what they should do with humanity. But there was some sort of divine intervention, and they were told, you will look over them until their destiny is complete. And what I found really fascinating was when they took away the language, and we no longer were telepathic. I've experienced telepathy on other worlds through meditation. You try to structure your sentence in your head, and they answer it. You don't even get to ask it, because the information's already gotten to them. Well, once we started talking and we were broken away, we started our imagination had to kind of fill in a lot of gaps, and then we became storytellers, and we developed and invented things that we needed out of necessity. And that somehow, combined with the emotion ramp up, made us a perfect vehicle for understanding and tapping into the creator, the source of all, which that is not something you find in other civilizations, and why they value the humans so much. They don't want us wiped out, because they want to experience something like that in a better environment than what we're living in today.
Well, this kind of ties into the question I get quite often, and that you might be able to chime in on, and that's the question of Rh negative blood. Is that what do you have any information on that?
Well, that's similar to what I was telling you. Some of the humans were not created from the monkey blood. Their blood switched over because of the Anunnaki blood. They just, the rhesus factor wasn't there, wasn't carried over,
Right.
or they removed it, because there was a small part of the population that they created to serve them. These were a little bit brighter individuals, and almost all are H negative people are incredibly bright.
Oh, okay. That sort of plays into what I was thinking. That's why I thought it was sort of connected with what you were saying. A lot of interesting stuff.
Also, this 5D world, we're sort of blending in with it already. The new world, all these colorful animals that are showing up,
Hmm.
flying fox, like a flying squirrel. I've
Yeah.
never seen anything like that before. I've seen fish that should not be on the planet, and a lot of that is somehow we're already beginning to meld with the higher frequency, and also the consciousness, which we call Gaia. She is very conscious, and she's sort of dictating what's coming and what's not coming. But I discovered through my research, and then I checked in with the off-worlders, why we became light bodies. And the reason we became light bodies on this world and no other is because Gaia, the reptilians, had placed a shield around the planet to prevent, they say, the prayers of men from reaching the heavens. And that also shielded her. So she became conscious, the same way humans became conscious. And she sees the humans, us, as her children. And so, like a mother hen trying to protect them from the shockwave, she was able to sort of intermingle with their energy and raise them with her during that particular ascension. And the next ascension, the one that will be even stronger, um, many more will be able to go with her because there just weren't that many. But it's okay, we don't have that many. As long as we have the right ones, we can restart the planet on the right foot.
Right. Well, I don't know if you've noticed all the rainbow mountains popping up. When I first noticed, it was in one location now. I think they said it's up to 5 different locations have these
Peru,
rainbow mountains. Yeah.
Peru was the first one. The colors are unreal, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Or I think
these
China was the
animals, these
first I'd
rainbow.
seen.
Oh, the one first one I saw was Peru.
Oh, okay.
The rainbow animals are crazy. There's one that I saw, a guy holding a wasp in his hand. Well, he wasn't holding it; he landed on there. But the top, where the head should be, that was praying mantis, and it had the little arms of the praying mantis. And then I've seen moths that have like spider legs up in the front, 8
Yeah.
spider legs, combination moth spider. Um, just really strange. And
Different
of course,
color watermelons now.
oh
All
yes.
sorts of weird stuff.
So that's from the new world, and I think it's slowly leaching into ours because the frequencies keep going up.
That's
Nice.
awesome. That's awesome, man. Well,
And it said that some people will simply just wake up and be there.
hmm
New world. When they wake up, it'll be as if a sort of massive Mande1a Effect took place, and you're there.
I hope so.
Yeah, I've often wondered that too. If people would get upgraded and not even know, because the way people just they're like, those have always been there, and I'm like, no, they haven't. What's the rainbow trees? I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of colorful stuff, and it seems like our world is being transformed already right before our very eyes, and many people don't even notice it. And it, what's your idea on? Do you think there's a? Have you? I don't know if you know the concept of NPCs or non-player characters. Like some of them are just sort of ran by AI, and they're not really a soul person like you or I, but they're sort of just background people like Dolores Cannon talks about.
Yeah, Jesus called them the wicked. They don't actually have a soul, but they are telepathic, so they can fill in the gaps. And because they're telepathic, they love to manipulate you.
And they're sort of just helping the Matrix maintain the status quo, huh?
No, those individuals, they're usually on the side of the reptilians or the Anunnaki. I mean, the Illuminati, because not having a soul, you can do a lot of the inhuman things they carry out.
Oh, okay, so psychopaths and things like that.
Worse than psychopaths.
Right.
Psychopaths, I don't know. They at least have a soul, from what I understand. Some of them, but these beings do not, so they're not affected. And by soul, I mean the spark of creator inside of them,
hmm
a piece of the creator aspect of it.
So, do you see this quarantine going down with the wave, or is it
It's
already?
already been taken down. It was
Yes.
last year, September. Angela might know more about that, but no, they actually announced that it was taken down, and some other grids were put up to help us. And then the ones that capture your soul, the ones the AI put, those were taken out as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard another channel talking about how they were constantly recycling us, and when you went to the light after death, you weren't really going into heaven. They were just sort of reinserting you back into the matrix, and as a loosh farm and all this stuff. But I didn't know. So
Would you like me to explain what Sophia Stewart explained to me about the Matrix?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, well, she is the author of the Matrix, the actual movie, not the Wachowski brothers. They plagiarized her work, but she's also the author of the Terminator series. She said that is the first part of what the machines become, and then the Matrix is the final part. In She said humans, in order to get a soul into a body, what the Anunnaki ended up doing was creating a sort of stargate within the feminine. The feminine, when she was created, they used far more upgrades, far higher technology to create the feminine than they did the masculine. But the feminine has a little stargate that activates within her, and when a child is going to well, is conceived, then the stargate opens, and within a few months, the soul that's been contracted, agreed upon to be born, will come to around the mother, and its energy will be sort of absorbed by the Stargate. Maybe just goes through the Stargate to start becoming part of this world. And what happens then is the mother starts rearranging the DNA, the junk DNA, the 95%, starts rearranging it into a sort of antenna for that specific soul. So our DNA in our body was specifically designed to hold our soul. And that is what she called the matrix, as associated with the womb. And now when you read in the Bible, you'll find the matrix written in there 6 times. And it's
Wow.
always associated with the womb. I quoted from the Bible in one particular verse because it dealt with the sacrifice of infants to the reptilians through fire. They would roast them in these large bronze bowls. And the Bible never distinguishes between the good Elohim, the Anunnaki, well, somewhat good,
Hmm.
and the bad, the more demonic, like kind of reptilian. It just the Elohim. Elohim means astronaut, basically. So you got Chinese astronauts, you got Japanese astronauts, and they're just referring to them as the astronaut. This is what the leader of the astronauts said.
Hmm.
So the reptilian says, Suffer all who break through the womb to pass through the fire, both men and beast. You know, the first ones, the firstborn, that you're supposed to sacrifice them to the reptilians. And now it reads, "Suffer all who pass through the matrix or enter the matrix to pass through the fire."
That's wild. Yeah, I've noticed that in the Bible how Matrix has taken the place of many of the places where womb was. That was one of the biggies for me because Matrix was never in the Bible, and I was like, "What? People don't know." And even aliens is in there now in another place. There's a lot of inserted
Wow.
words that weren't there before.
Mm.
Wild stuff. So it does follow along with that same concept. So do you think a lot of that, killing the firstborn in the Old Testament was uh, really the Elohim rather than because I'd already come across the information that a lot of what was termed God in the Old Testament was the Elohim or the more like archons people will call them or like you're saying astronauts, the Anunnaki, those from heaven that come to earth. I think is how that's termed. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. And there's an individual he's been interviewed on Leap Project a few times, but he was an interpreter for a writer and a scholar for the Catholic Church, and he shows that the most ancient word for spirit is rucha, and the very first drawing, the very first glyph for it, looks a little bit like a spaceship, and is hovering over water. Well, the ruha could hover over water. It was a UFO, but there were others that couldn't hover over water, but this one could. So when it says in the Bible, in the beginning, the spirit of the Lord, how moved over the waters. But what it's saying is that this craft, the Ruach of the Elohim, hovered over the earth, and the earth was laid waste. Well, the earth was laid waste because it had just been ripped out from Tiamat in a massive explosion, and a lot of life was wiped out.
So another somebody's asking about passages in the Bible. Which ones stand out most to you that they're clearly talking about the Anunnaki? They don't. No, they don't use the term Anunnaki. That's what I was just explaining. That Anunnaki means those from heaven to earth who
And so
come.
does Elohim. Elohim means those who left their lofty abode from the heavens and came to earth, or those who
Right.
came from heaven to earth. But heaven doesn't mean where the angels are with harps. That word means outer space, the cosmos.
Right, and I think two specific instances that come to mind would be the Tower of Babel, where you mentioned earlier, actually, that exact scripture, where they were saying that, let us they actually say us, the Elohim, let us, confuse their languages. And then another one was, I believe, maybe during the Noah scriptures. Once again, they talk about us, the Elohim. So I think these are two specific instances I can think of that were actually
Yeah, I was going to mention the Tower of Babel, but remember, before they ever get to Earth, they're on their ship, and the Lord God asks, "Let us go down to Earth and see what men are up to." If he was God, he'd know what they were.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And there was another one where, often I'll say that, when it says your God is jealous or your God is angry, that's also the Elohim, because that's a human or a being's emotions. That's not, if you're, when you think of anger, you don't get angry until something sort of catches you off guard, you know what I mean? Or you don't get jealous unless you think you're losing something. But if you're God, you have it all. And, so these are clues to the fact that we're not talking about Creator God in these instances, because how could Creator God be jealous of anything? You know what I mean? Or angry,
Well, David Dwyer had a really interesting little thing he would talk about. He was at he's written a lot of books, kind of a spiritual teacher, and he had this thing where he was saying the guy's asleep, trying to sleep, and a car goes by, and somebody's new sports car, the alarm keeps going off because it's too sensitive and waking him up, and he gets really upset, and he tells his wife, if I had superpowers, I'd flatten every tire on that car. She goes, you wouldn't do that if you had superpowers, godlike powers. He goes, well, if I had godlike powers, I'd burn it. He goes, no, if you had godlike powers, that car wouldn't bother you.
Yeah, good point.
That's a great
Also,
point.
you mentioned, Angela
Good point.
mentioned the research she did with Ramtha. One of the times I went to get a book, I was told to find this one book when I passed through a bookstore, so I had to get off and go inside. And I ran my hand along the wall and pulled out this red book, and it was Ramtha. What the heck is this? And I opened it. It's the very first passage I ever read, and I thought, okay, yeah, I got to buy the book. Ramtha, J.C. Knight, was being asked the question by this one lady in the audience, and I cannot believe this lady asked this question. Apparently, she'd married this young man, and he had a lot of money, and so did the family, but the family was not accepting of her in any way, shape, or form. So she's asking Ramtha, what must I do for them to love me unconditionally? His sisters and his family. And I'm like, unconditionally? So anyway, Ramtha says to her, the question is, can you love them unconditionally, knowing they will never love and accept you?
Wow, that's big.
Yeah,
So
that's
I knew
powerful.
he was for real.
That's powerful.
What would,
Also, Ramtha mentioned that Jesus had an identical twin brother, and Michel Ledwith, he was the priest. He was a deacon over in Ireland. I mean, not deacon, the dean of this university in Ireland, and he left all that to search for the evidence for the twin, Jesus' twin, and he's found quite a bit
Wow.
of evidence, and I do reference some of the evidence he located.
Wow. That's amazing.
it is amazing information when you get into Jesus and the twin, and Thomas, and all that research you did with that. Someone's asking about the Nephilim. What's sort of your view on the whole idea of the giants and the Nephilim? And I mean, doesn't that tie in with the Anunnaki coming down and some of them getting with Earth's women or whatever?
Well, remember I told you they were androgynous.
Hmm.
So when they got with Earth women, it wasn't until after the reptilians, for the most part, but there were a few that they were experimenting with on Tiamat, and they did find them very attractive. And if you've ever seen the statues of Easter Island, those aren't just heads. They have entire bodies that go way down, and there's writing in the back of them that no one's ever interpreted. And when
Oh.
they got to that island, there were giants on that island. They were very tall, white, with red hair, elongated skulls. That's been removed from history. But if you go back
Wow.
far enough, you'll find those records that they were not just the small brown people, but taller, white, red-haired individuals with elongated skulls. Now, the Nephilim were born from the daughters of Adam and Eve, and this is you'll find this fascinating because when they were able to connect the soul to the body, it was with Eve that they were able to do that. So all her daughters, when they had a child, a soul would be connected to the body, as opposed to all the millions that were already alive who didn't have that. They were just working biomechanical beings. And in the Bible, in Genesis 6:4, one of the only places that refers to the Nephilim, there's a couple other parts where, like, Jacob and Caleb steal the blue apples from the Nephilim, and they're called grapes at that point. The huge cluster, because that's what they look like, a cluster.
Hmm.
Anyway, the Nephilim, when they were born of the daughters of Eve. So they had souls in them, and they were incredibly intelligent because they had the larger brain of the Anunnaki, and incredibly powerful because back then a monkey, if an ape were to attack you, just a regular chimpanzee, they can rip your arm off and beat you to death with it. They're just so powerful. We're not that powerful. In survival of the species, the strongest survive. We weren't those. We're nowhere near that. The reptilians actually and the Anunnaki took our strength way down so they could control us. But the
Wow.
Nephilim had souls. Okay, the the others, if an Anunnaki took a wife that was not a daughter of Adam and Eve, then he would also be a giant, but he would not have a soul. He'd be more animal-like. And here on Earth, if you take a lion and a tiger and mix them together, the offspring, will be much bigger than the two. It's called the liger, way bigger. There's something in the genetics doesn't stop the growth, so they think that might be what happened. Something in the genetic code of the the female did not stop the growth of these beings. But the Nephilim were actually heroes,
Hmm.
and whenever you think of Hercules, a hero, he's a demigod. His father was not human. And Perseus, a demigod, his father was not human. The Romans understood when you call someone a hero, you're sort of implying they're not really human. They're half human, half god. And the Bible specifically states in Genesis 6:4 about the Nephilim,
Hmm.
these were the heroes of old, the
Hmm.
men of renown, because they're the ones that wiped out the reptilian fleet with the new beam weapon ships they'd created in the interim after the Galactic invasion. And that war took place about 9,000 years ago. The damage on the moon, when you see a crater on the moon, that's not a crater. A crater would be a hole. That's literally what crater means. It's a hole. These are not holes. They're convex, not concave. So they have a slope to a roundness to them,
Yeah.
and they're only 4 kilometers deep. Doesn't matter how big they are, 186 kilometers across or something. But no matter how big they are, they're only 4 kilometers deep, and they're swept perfectly clean, and then sharp rise on the edge. They've duplicated that. The Thunderbolts project has duplicated that in laboratory um, experiments. So these new beam weapon ships which were like large cigar ships, they could maintain a thunderbolt in one position, one location, just keep firing and burning till the entire section of all the cities were gone. And they would have killed every last reptilian, but they were held back.
Right. Oh, your cat's making a cameo appearance. I see, Angela. um, so,
Yeah.
so one thing that, and that's sort of what we're looking at with the Sodom and Gomorrah incident too, isn't it? Some type of, you know, weapon used.
Yeah, fiction goes into that quite a bit, and there were 5 kingdoms there, not two. They were side by side all along, and it's believed they were at the base of the Dead Sea. They did find artifacts there, but they were stopped by the country because of some Muslim belief or something. But those cities were destroyed with nuclear devices, and Zachariah Sitchin goes into detail about that. These Anunnaki wanted to show humans, you know, put them in their place, teach them a lesson, and so they got permission to use the nukes on the planet, and they set off 5 of them, and the radiation, and this is found in the writings called Lamentations. They say there's an evil wind. Doesn't matter if you close your door, it'll come through. And so many people throughout Mesopotamia and Persia were wiped out, including Anunnaki,
Mm-hmm.
that were wiped out by the radiation that these people released. They have used atomic weapons, and then there were other atomic weapons before that during the galactic battle with the reptilians. They used atomic weapons as well.
I mean, you are just a wealth of information, and it's such a pleasure having you on. You know, I'm sure I could go on for hours with these questions and stuff.
Yeah, I
But
kind of wanted to go back to to what Angela received from her son. I was blown away by that. I really was. I listened to it several times in a row, and
Oh,
any
thanks.
other interview that came up after that, because it matched everything I had researched, and also what I was learning about how they want to save as many as possible because they're just not ready. They could have been ready,
yeah,
you know, if they'd have done what you call the RV and things like that, and
Hmm.
made the world, released all these programs for humanitarian projects, we would be in a much better situation. If they just enforced the laws on the books, we'd be in a much better situation. The banks wouldn't be doing what they're doing. Bernie wouldn't have been able to do what he was doing. You know, all they really have to do is enforce those laws, but they allow people to get away with whatever because it's their buddies. And so we'd be in a much better world. But as it is, the world is in quite a unique location, situation, and just everything for what's about to happen. They did not think this was possible. They did not think humans could actually push through this, and based on how much knowledge was kept from us and how repressed we were and how dumbed down the school systems did everything and how oppressive the religions were, they just simply didn't think it would happen. Have you ever heard of Michael Lee Hill? He believes he was Anunnaki.
okay.
He,
I think I have seen an interview with him or heard him on a call or something. I
he
can't.
has, yeah, he has been. He was contacted by the Anunnaki. He is Enki. When they relocated him, and I spoke with him at Serpent Mount during the eclipse,
Wow.
and he told me that the reason he came down to Earth, and he didn't tell them that he was coming, so they didn't know where he was to prove that humans could do this, and that's what Jesus did. He wanted to prove a human could do this,
Mm-hmm.
and so far the galaxy hasn't really been on our side. They're thinking, no, they can't let us fix this, fix that, and that way they'll have a chance. But they're not here on the playing field. And I mentioned to Angela that a while back I just stopped listening to my guides because there are times when I know I'm right and their guidance is off because this has never happened before. So how can you give me guidance on something you've never experienced before? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one down here on the playing field, the ball's in my hands. I need to make a play. I need to move with this.
Yeah.
So yeah, they get upset when you do that, but it's true.
Yeah, they really haven't played fair, have they?
I kind of
So,
envision some of these guides. Let's say you're playing the Spurs and you're on the court there, and they're sitting in little folding seats on the side there, and the ball gets given to you, and you're going to make a 3-pointer, and they hit you upside the head with a 44-ounce cold drink because because they're just trying to help you out. That easiest shot for you. They know you
yeah.
can make that shot. They just want to put a little bit more of a draw into it or something. Because you are not helping.
Uh,
Yes, that's so true, man.
so do you know if there's any other planets moving closer to Earth, which kind of coincides with what Christopher was saying, that there's going to be planets, including Nibiru, that makes up the cosmic galactic event? There's
Yes,
firework in the sky?
yes, and Mike, no, not Michael Cremo. I can't remember his name. He's he's a researcher on Planet X. He created. I can't access my computer right now, but if you look it up, it's called Planet X 101. I cannot remember his last name. He was a science editor for CNN for a while. Michael something. Anyway, he's done a tremendous amount of work on this, and he actually has the names of these planets that are coming in, and they're massive in size. Hercules is way bigger than Planet X, and Planet X is pretty big as it is. In
Mhm.
order for Planet X to even be a brown dwarf, again, you have to understand it was like what 1965 before anyone theorized there were brown dwarfs out there,
Mm-hmm.
or red dwarfs, and the mass required, like the way they understand physics, for a body the size of Jupiter or like Jupiter to become a smoldering brown dwarf, they would have to be 3 times the size of Jupiter. So when you hear, oh, this planet 7 times the size of Earth coming by, going to pull us off our axis. It's way bigger than that because Earth is 318 Jupiter masses, or 318 Earth masses to create one Jupiter, and this thing is 3 Jupiters in size. It's over 900 Earth masses in size.
Wow, that's
Planet X.
huge.
And Planet X is probably it would take 900 Planet X's to fill in her Cobulus.
Is it
And
Michael Kors?
no.
No.
Look
Okay.
up on YouTube. Look up Planet X 101.
Okay. Yeah, I found I found Planet X 101. Let's see. Is that the channel? I guess it's.
No, it's a YouTube video. I'm thinking, I keep hearing in my head Michael Cremo, but he's the archaeologist with Forbidden Archaeology. I got to speak with him for a while too, and I've actually got to speak to this other individual. I cannot believe I cannot remember.
It comes up as your own world books, so I guess.
Yeah, he has, that's his website.
Okay.
Does it mention his name there? Who wrote that? Any one of the books in there, it'll have his name.
Let me scroll
And
down.
my books are all boxed up, so I can't access them.
Oh,
Maybe
that's
one
okay.
of your listeners out there they'll probably know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'll go to the
Look up
about
Planet
page
X
and see if I can get a name.
101 and a few others, and he's done incredible research on that. He does not really see things the way I do. When I was talking to him, he is familiar with the incoming wave of energy. He wrote about it in It for the Species.
Is it Marshall Masters?
Marshall, I'm saying Michael, it's Marshall Masters. He
Okay.
has done a tremendous amount of research on it, and just look up some of his videos, some of his more latest ones, and they go into great detail of these planets. Of course, they expect all kinds of destruction, which should be happening, but I was told very specifically by a very powerful angel, it will simply not be permitted. What you guys have accomplished is beyond anything that was ever even expected of us. So all that destruction is pointless. Why destroy what you guys have accomplished? Why allow it to be destroyed, basically, because of the cycles when it could be altered. And
I've got
what
a
we're
question
doing.
for you.
Hmm?
I've got a question. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
With all the planets coming closer to Earth, what are your thoughts on the fake sun, the sun simulator that NASA apparently put up to block out all the planets coming closer to Earth? Is that true? What do you think?
I've seen some of the work on the sun simulator. There
Hmm.
could be something in between us and the sun that they're hitting with some sort of lasers to intensify the brightness in case the sun gets less bright. But no, they could not. I don't think NASA could hide, like Jupiter. How far away is that? And we can see it at night. Saturn, I can see that with my eyes.
Yeah, I saw
These
Jupiter last
objects,
night. Yeah.
these objects should be visible now. They should be, and they're not. And I think it's those spheres that Corey Good spoke of, that they're getting in the way and simulating the stars, so we don't see them. Because remember, fear would be a terrible thing for us to move into right now. And if people started seeing what's up there, they would probably lose it. They really would. A friend of mine took a picture of a weird rainbow. It was in reverse to the sun, and the rainbow. She sent it to me, and I said, "You don't see the planet there? There's a massive planet. It's huge. You can see it where the building was. So I'd say it was." If the sun was up there, this thing would be like 10 diameters or more of the sun's in size. And you can see the striations on it, like Jupiter, and you can see the darker back half of it. And you can see the chemtrails trying to cover it up as quickly as possible. She didn't understand why the chemtrails were trying to cover up the rainbow, but it was the atmosphere of this planet being lit up by the sun.
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
something that big, that close, we should have felt some gravity issues here on the planet. So again, I think they're offsetting that with other heavier objects opposite us. In the same way that astronauts on the way to the moon would get to the midway point and they could kind of have no gravity, they wouldn't have effects of either one.
Yeah, I've often thought it would be easier to cloak something than to simulate the sun myself, but I have seen some pretty interesting pictures where it looks like maybe they're using some kind of reflective device. But,
yeah, directly in the way of the sun and making that shine bright.
yeah.
I don't know. The sun's been pretty bright lately. I don't know that it needs their help.
Yeah, and the
There must be
flickering,
times-
I'm
Yeah,
like,
flickering. I've seen that flickering. It's unreal. That's like about to turn off, like one of those neon lights. You turn them on and they're kind of flickering. They're not quite coming on. I've seen that.
Yeah. Welcome to the Truman Show.
And as far as Planet X, I have photographed it. I've seen it myself. And when I was on Leak Project, it was I can't remember his name. He had the one here in San Antonio. He said, I'm not buying it. I'm not sure. You haven't convinced me. And I said, well, you're here in San Antonio. Let's go down to the University of Texas here. I'll go to their main library. We'll go up to the second floor. We'll pull out the encyclopedia called Encyclopedia of New Science and Invention, published in 1988. We'll pull out book number 18, and on page 2248, there will be the images of Planet X when they found it. And it's showing it to be 1 billion miles outside of Pluto. And then they also show the Dead Star, which is 50 billion miles out in the direction of Orion. And they show the Pioneer satellites. That's what the Pioneer satellites went up there to look for. And also they were deviated from their course. Their gravity pulled them off their course. And I read some really somebody pulled this one out of there. You know what? It's a theory of why they moved out of orbit. They moved out of orbit exactly as they should have if they were being pulled on an object that was out in that direction. But
Wow.
it's in the space probes section of the encyclopedia. So they didn't exactly lie to us or keep the information from us. They did publish it. Just nobody knows it's there.
Right. Hidden in plain sight. Nobody knows where to look. One thing somebody's asking me about, because I've heard you talk extensively, I know it's also in the book, but I've seen interviews where you've talked extensively about Jesus and the twins. Someone was really interested in that. Do you recall which show you went into the most on that? I thought you talked quite
That
a
would
bit
have been
on
Galactic Connection.
the Galactic Connection one. Okay, that's in the playlist. So if you guys click the playlist, Awakened, I forgot your name now. You were asking about it. If you awakened her story, if you click on the there and you find the one with Galactic Connection, it's in the playlist. Because yeah, that was super interesting. I've watched so many of them, man. I can't remember which one you did.
Well, the one where I tried to keep a different topic on different things so I don't repeat myself so much.
Right.
But there were two painters who, well, there were several painters who knew that, but Leonardo da Vinci, when he painted the twin, Jesus' twin, the twin is on Jesus' left side. That would be where Judas would have been sitting, because he would have had to been handed that big tortilla-looking thing full of mutton or whatever, and Jesus would have taken a bite and he would hand it over to the left, and it would just keep going around the table. That's why nobody knew. Well, what are you talking about? You know, what do you mean when you give this to everybody? Got it, and everybody got a bite off of it, so they didn't understand. And in the actual painting of the Last Supper, and you actually have to go see the painting or look in the National Geographic before they touched it up. But the guy who is believed to be Judas, the kind of rat-looking one, dressed in blue, and he's holding a little money bag there. Well, his toga, whatever you want to call it, his shirt is pulled down, way down on his chest, like something's just yanking it down. And the material is ruffled up there in his arm. And if you look more closely, there is a child in his arm, wrapped in the blue, and his neck, because it's the lighter color than his face is very dark. And the neck area, the chest area is kind of light looking. You'll see the face of the baby and the back of the head, and he's just kind of he's just laying there on his chest. And the guy who's got his both hands up in the air, and he's looking with his eyes sideways, like near the money bag, but he's not looking at the money bag. You can tell he's looking at the child. He's got both hands up, and he's looking at the child. That was to imply that there was a child from the marriage, but it did not come from Jesus. It came from the twin. The twin had to redeem, or he was a redeemer for Mary Magdalene. This one really struck me as weird, that Jesus actually never consummated the marriage, that he had to remain virgin. And I thought, okay, well, that's kind of crazy. But I've come across way too much information that specifically states that to just dismiss it.
Now it's Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper painting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, The Last Biscuit. And then there's another one by Nicolas Poussin. His name is spelled really weird. Poussin. He's French, and his paintings are in the Louvre. And his paintings were the ones used in Rennes-le-Château with the Da Vinci Code. That's one of his paintings, Shepherdess, No Temptation. And he did several other paintings. There were some paintings he did called the seven sacraments, and he did a self-portrait of himself. And in the self-portrait, he's not wearing a Masonic ring. He later redoes a self-portrait of himself wearing the Masonic ring, and
Hmm.
he's holding his pen at a weird angle, and he's holding the tablet at a strange angle. This tablet is at 23 and a half degrees. That's the degree of the Earth it's angled at. But the other pen in his hand, that's at 6 degrees roughly, and that would have been the tilt on Tiamat. So he's showing Tiamat had this tilt, Earth now has this tilt. And he painted in the Seven Sacraments, the new set that he created, a, a twin in three different of the paintings. And the twin's always wearing the same kind of rusty brown looking orangish colors. And
Hmm.
Jesus is always in white. So when you've got the one where I think it's called the ordination, where he's handing the keys of the kingdom to Jesus, well, it's the one in the rusty brown color handing the keys to Jesus. You can see the one wearing, I mean, to Peter. You can see the other guy wearing white in the crowd talking. So Jesus never gave Peter anything.
Okay,
Keys to
I've got the seven sacraments pulled up, and you can see that was the
Eucharisty.
twin
In the
leaving.
Eucharisty,
Yeah, the Holy Eucharist too.
okay,
This.
there's a flat table there, a square table,
Hmm.
and they're not sitting; they're laying down on the floor,
Right.
and that is the custom. They didn't have chairs. You would sit on the floor or lay on the floor. You'd have a cushion for your elbow, and you would use your right arm to get whatever you needed on the table. That was how they sat, and it was a large square table.
Hmm.
And you can see the guy leaving the room. He's the only one the light isn't shining on his face. That's the same one that's appeared in all the other paintings. That is the exact duplicate of Jesus, and in his hand is a money bag. So Judas was the twin of Jesus.
Oh wow.
I've
The
got a
identical.
silly question about the painting, Joseph.
Mhm.
I heard it's Mandela as well, wine goblets, and now it's wine glasses when they didn't really have glass back then. Is that true?
Right. That's the original. That's the Da Vinci one. I just switched back to that one, but yeah. So now we're looking at the Da Vinci one here, and supposedly that didn't have windows in the back either. I think it's something someone else said. They didn't remember windows.
Well, there's in the painting you see the hand with a knife
Let me
Hmm.
get a
to the left
restored
of
version because this is pretty.
Mary Magdalene, where she's sitting, and there's that guy wearing blue, and he's got kind of his hand like to her throat, and he's got his other hand coming behind, and people think he's holding a knife. That's not his hand holding a knife. You'd have to break his hand right above the wrist and twist it backwards, directly backwards, to have him hold, and then inside out, sort of like wrench it to have him hold that knife, and that's
Oh,
even a different color.
yeah. I
That's
see the
even a
knife
different
and
color.
the hand. Yeah, that's
Yeah, and so people would say, "Oh, Da Vinci made a mistake," but Da Vinci was famous for not making that mistake. That particular individual is the disciple who was murdered, and that's why they have to split the name of Judas and Thomas, which Judas was Thomas, the twin. And all the good attributes went to Thomas, and all the bad ones went to Judas, so they could destroy who he was. But the disciple who was murdered, his name was Stephen, and Stephen was, if you read the Bible in Acts, he's one of the first ones, and he's stoned at the gates by Saul of Tarsus, who is the disciple Paul.
right.
So his followers, who would be Matthew, not Matthew, but the one in the Gospel, he's a follower of Paul's. John Mark was a follower of Paul's, and Lucanus was a follower of Paul's. So they're going to have to doctor the writings a little bit so they don't show that it was um, Paul who executed the first or martyred the first disciple. They sort of just move him out of the way. Just
Hmm.
covered.
And that's why I was telling them in the. I was like, man, you. It's. I knew it was. You have so much information on this topic. That's why they really got to get the book. You had to split the book into two books. There's so much information. So.
Well, I took about 200 pages out of it. It was just too long, too much information
Wow.
in there, and I hated to do it, but I figured, well, I can get that information on talk shows because it just slowed the story down way too much. It
But a lot
wasn't
of
as
people like to see the references. You know, they like to know, is he just making this up? Because it's hard to believe a lot of this stuff,
a
man.
lot of the
But you did
references
the hard.
I mentioned in the book where those came from.
Right. So
The ones
yeah,
that I
it's.
felt were the most important.
I'm really looking forward to this up and coming book you've got coming too, and um,
I've, Joseph, I've got a question for you. What were you talking about? The blue apples or the blue avians or something?
yeah,
What
someone
are
else
they
was
all
asking
about?
about that too. The blue apples.
Okay, when my book starts out, one of the things I was guided to do a lot of this, and I was shown visions, and then I had to try and find the information to back it up. The in Rennes-le-Chateau, when Saunier broke the code about that little piece of paper that was hidden in a tiny little crevice, in there it states that he says to look for the painters Poussin and Thankyou the younger, and so he has to go to France and get the paintings to be able to rate the codes that were hidden there in that area. So it names Poussin in that encryption, but it also states further down, it says at midday blue apples, and no one knew what that meant, and I didn't know what it meant, but I was told to put that in there. And later I found out that the blue apples they look like a billiard ball. They're cobalt blue in color, and they shimmer with ribbons of golden light. And according to legend, the Anunnaki had those, but they came from the center of the galaxy. And I'm going, how do you get something out of the center of the galaxy? So what I found out was that human beings, just by the fact that we are genetically human, in the photon band, which the Earth has entered, the photon band, the energy band at this sort of this centripetal center of the galaxy, we've entered this energy field they're calling the photon band. That is midday. Okay, so within this photon band, crystals can grow inside of humans' heads, and they're magnetic crystals. And you can Google that. People are having trouble with that. They're having to have them surgically removed. But the people that are growing those are pretty much the elite, the Illuminati, because they're not eating the Monsanto Frankenfood, they're not drinking fluoride, and they're not under stress. They have more money than they know what to do with. So if you're now under those conditions, you're thriving, you're happy, you're going to grow those crystals. However, if you're always in survival mode, drinking a lot of fluoride, you're not going to grow those crystals. And what happened was, in the other timeline, the apocalypse timeline, the Kennedys had won. Kennedy had not been assassinated, and his brother took over after that. And their Peace Corps, the Peace Corps they created, was actually funded more like the military-industrial complex. They went all over the world, and they created schools, and they created clinics, and they paved roads, and they brought in electricity and clean water. And so people wanted them in their countries. They wanted the Peace Corps there, and they wanted Americans there. And eventually they all decided, well, why don't we just become one big government? And you guys, the U.S. is doing so well. Why don't you just, become the one world government? And they did, and that's when eventually the one world leader took over. But what the Illuminati was trying to do here, now in that situation, people were thriving. They were making money. There was peace. And so the crystals were growing in the heads of the humans over there. And when the shock waves hit, a lot of them died. Like I said, only 144,000 roughly made it. But a lot of the humans were executed. A lot of them died. But when the shock wave hit, that shock wave, it energized the crystals inside their heads. And later, when the reptilians were breaking skulls open because they love to eat the pituitary gland, especially if you're terrified, and this wave of energy would have terrified them. The pituitary gland is really delicious to them if it's been sauteed in all the chemicals of fear. That's why they like to scare their victims before they eat them. And in the process, they kept biting these crystals. They didn't know what they were for, and then they finally figured out what these crystals were and what they were for. And they put together the cobalt blue, the blue apples, and they're used for stargates. They're used to open stargates. If you held one in your hand, you could walk into a stargate. They show these on Ancient Aliens all the time. These openings, or like carvings of a doorway that goes nowhere, right into a rock. When you would stand there, you would hold the sphere in your hand, and you would think where you want it to be. But the planets have to be in a correct alignment for that to happen, and then you transfer that location. Well, with these many millions and millions of these blue apples, they were able to take entire fleets through the stargates into fourth and fifth dimension, because they can move into fourth dimension electronically with their technology, and they can go into five, but not very long. But once they got into those two dimensions, they had these, how humans love to weaponize things, where they weaponized these devices. And I got to hold a pistol in, it was like a vision dream kind of thing, like what Paul says, I don't know, it felt real. And in this pistol thing, it was like the one Han Solo uses in Star Wars. It's like the broom handle, Mauser. Anyway, you would drop the crystal into the magazine area, which was completely hollow, and the crystal will hover there. And I said, oh, that's right, they're magnetic. And when you pull the trigger, let's say you fired it at an angel or a ship, a massive ship, didn't matter what you fired it at. It wasn't like a projectile that went from here to there. It appeared there instantaneously, and the power was like the power of creation being released all at once. So it's like literally the power of God in these crystals. So the weapons, they had no way to withstand the weapons, and the reptilians took over the entire galaxy, and they basically farmed out humans to all the different worlds and soaked up Loosh, and it was that's what Dolores Cannon says. In the future, something horrible happens, and we have to come back and change it. And we didn't come back to change it. We came back to mitigate the damage. We came back as cannon fodder, basically, for the apocalypse. That was our mission, and we were basically supposed to just kind of try and dampen the effect of what actually happened, how many crystals they got their hands on, so that they have a fighting chance in the future. But a lot of the soul groups, a lot from my soul group, entered the Illuminati. We have more than enough credibility to do that. We've worked with the dark side so many times that we could easily fit in. Anyway, all those ideas about putting fluoride in the water, that was from my soul group, apparently. I'm not too happy about that. But it prevented the reptilians from getting their hands on these crystals. And the Monsanto food and all that stuff that they're genetically modifying, that's prevented them from getting their hands on these crystals. So when the ships arrived, the medicine, the med beds and the ships that can heal you and these other locations, they'll be correcting all that damage that's been inflicted.
That's pretty interesting. So the whole 144,000 thing, that was that's from, is that the same thing from
Yeah,
the
the
Bible?
timeline. Yeah, the timeline. Yeah, I believe it is.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it's pretty much exactly the way she described it.
So by
And the
robbing
people,
us of it, they've sort of kept it from the darkies, if you will, and then they can fix us later, so to speak.
yeah, we were the ones that were going to be growing them in our heads, so they
Hmm.
just prevented us from growing them in our heads. But because we're under so much stress and not getting paid a whole lot, and they just keep raising the rents and charging more taxes on everything, so everybody's stressed out. There's no way in hell you're going to grow blue apple crystals in your head under those conditions.
That makes sense. So it made it a little bit worse, but it made it better for the future, I guess, because now they don't have their hands on all these blue apples or blue crystals to create these weapons.
Correct.
That's interesting. Wow, that's some pretty cool stuff, man.
And Mary Magdala was the one in charge of the blue apples. She was a
Oh,
princess,
wow.
Benjamite tribe. And so when Jesus went to raise Lazarus, in the first 6 centuries, when they depict Jesus in the catacombs raising Lazarus, he's depicted with a wand like Harry Potter. And at the end of the wand are three spears, much like the club card in a regular deck. And these three spears, they're all blue apples. And what happens is, in a morphogenic field, when you stand within the field of three of these crystals, you are literally resonating at the frequency at the center of the galaxy. Whatever you think becomes reality, whatever you think manifests. So when he said to Lazarus to rise up, Lazarus rose up, even though it had been 4 days and he was dead. I find it fascinating that in Rennes-le-Chateau, only on one day, it's like January 17th, I believe, when the sun hits this window that is the raising of Lazarus, you'll see three blue lights on the wall, and they call them blue
Oh,
apples. And
that's cool.
so he probably raised them on that day. And now the mayor of that town has put something over the window so the sun will never shine in it again, so people will stop going to Rennes-le-Chateau.
Ah,
S-
party pooper. Well, that's been awesome, man. I can't believe we're almost at 2 hours here, and we got 140 people watching. So
Not
Well,
140.
no, not 144,000.
this event that's coming is not supposed to be something you fear. It's something they need to fear, and they are afraid of it.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get us to go into World War III so that it'll drop the frequency of the planet and help them out.
That's what I've been
But it's
thinking. They're
not.
doing everything they
Yeah.
can to keep us in that lower vibration, and so that's if we take anything away from this whole thing, it would be not to live in fear, to keep our vibes up, to be there for others, and anything else. Keep some water on hand, distilled
And
water.
Water and food.
try to remain happy. And one thing that's really messed with me was my beliefs. I don't care what your beliefs are, any belief. Your beliefs are limiting. My beliefs were limiting. I was experiencing things that were impossible, that my mind could not wrap itself around them when I was up in Denver, I mean, up in Colorado in the mountains. and I still cannot bring myself to actually believe it, but I saw it, I experienced it, I was there. And so belief is a massive form of control. Any belief, because you say, well, I'll believe this until I believe that. No, don't do that. Just accept and allow, and try and be happy, and you'll see some things change quite a bit. And also try and spread goodness every day. Allow someone, they're trying to get it out of a McDonald's or something, and there's a red light ahead of you, and there's, just let them get out. Give them a chance. Just do small random acts of kindness. All of that adds up in raising the frequency of the planet.
Definitely. Don't flip people the bird or cut them off in traffic. And, yeah, and it sounds like you're saying to be a little bit unbiased and on the fence about stuff, not to jump into any worldviews. Yeah, it's a direct endorsement of the channel. I'm just playing. But yeah, that's sort of where I learned that it seems like you grow and learn so much more if you sort of empty yourself of anything that you think you figured out already. And
Yeah, it was in Star Wars. He says, you must forget everything you've learned. Yoda does. And what I found fascinating about this new Star Wars, the more powerful Jedis have both sides, both aspects of the light and the dark. And I've done that. And I was told, wow, how they say which wolf wins. There's two wolves fighting. Which one wins? The one you feed the most, correct? That's, you've heard that. Well, my wolves aren't fighting. They're standing on each side of me. They're one with me. I don't view one as less than the other. They are me. And until we come to that realization that we are all these things, you can't say this part of God is beautiful and this part of God is ugly. Everything is creator. And I found out also the creator, the feminine is far larger and more powerful in scope than the masculine. The masculine is here to protect and to serve her and to basically be there, support her. And the feminine, divine feminine, she was the one who pretty much ran everything. I find it interesting that the Indians, when they call her Spider Woman, the creator of the world, Spider Woman, the female spider, is much larger in size than the male spider. She's the one that does pretty much all the work. And in the galaxy, the same thing. The center of the galaxy would be considered the masculine male creator energy that's constant, ever changing. And around it is the beautiful feminine in all its different aspects of beauty, dancing towards its destruction, kind of.
mm-hmm.
But you cannot have one without the other and be able to create. And for the longest time, they removed her from there. She's a very big part of it. And also, every aspect of us, what we think is bad in us or wrong with us, is something we have to accept that is part of us and just keep it in check. But don't try and sweep it under the rug and deny it's you. It's all of us, and we have to accept that part of us if we're going to move forward.
You do the shadow work, yeah.
So it's about rising above the duality, really, and realizing we're all one. It's changing our perspective from being in a specific group or belief, and sort of rising above, realizing there's the good guys, there's the bad guys. It's all working together for experience or whatever, growth.
Yeah, just like I had mentioned, that every horrific thing they did to humanity has actually been in our favor to make us so unique. We're unlike any other beings on the planet, in the galaxy, and we can access Creator faster than any of them can.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So how do you feel about all of this? Give you a chance to shout out here before we head on out, Angela.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you have to integrate your dark shadows within you and your good sides too, and just, be complete and be whole. And that's probably the only way you can ascend, really. I mean, you can't just ignore the bad stuff or dwell on the bad stuff or your own shadows, and just integrate it and learn to love yourself, really. I mean, that's key to everything, right? At the end of the day, it all comes down to self-love in a non-egotistical way. Just accept yourself the way you are. And if we could all do that on the planet, I think we would ascend tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. I was noticing how, when you focus on the negative stuff, you're either sort of resonating in fear about what they might do to you, or you're resonating in anger at what they're getting away with. But if you can sort of rise above that and just realize, hey, they're playing their part, and just sort of leave it at that, and you won't get sucked in by all of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also sometimes I get like bad thoughts going through my head, looping and looping, and then it's like, wait a minute, this is not coming from me. Who's putting this into my head? So you have to kind of like go, okay, stop. That's not my thoughts. It's not me. And sometimes it's an attack too, right? I mean, especially in these end times now, where they're losing their power, the dark ones, and they're trying to sink their teeth into you to get more food out of you. So you
Yeah.
have to kind of realize, where this is coming from, and then just kind of go, okay, that's not me thinking that. Everything is good, and so
Yeah, and they're attacking
yeah.
from all sides. The media, we got all these. How can I say it where the algorithms won't catch it? These events that's put on for show to get us
Mhm.
either angry about it, wanting to, just sinking into politics and just all of this stuff. It's so once you're
False
out of it,
flags, yeah.
looking at it, it's like it's designed in a way that you can see what they're up to.
Yeah, and now they want to shut down YouTube channels and Facebooks and all that
Yeah, that's
stuff,
why I'm
right?
not saying any
This is
specific
why
words.
I know, and this is why we're kind of like jumping over into the MeWe group, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, you should jump over there too, Joseph. Where there's another site called MeWe, and it's
I,
like Facebook.
I'm associated with MeWe. You'll have to send me the link so I can connect with you. The name you're using.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's actually in the description of this video. So,
Okay.
well, this has been awesome, you guys. I really appreciate both of your time, and it's hope we can do it again in the future. And definitely, I expect to have Joseph on again if he has any more information he wants to share. I know you're constantly getting stuff, and you've always got this platform to share any information that you have that you want to share with the group, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, no problem at all.
Thank you,
Wow.
Joseph.
And thank you, Angela, for being there as well. I learned so
Oh,
much from
thank you,
that
Joseph.
long talk we had.
Hope,
It was so great.
hopefully we'll be all like sucking on some margaritas on the other side sometime, or maybe in this world
At
some
at a
point.
tiki bar with my cat Shadow.
Definitely. Well, I guess I'm going to close it out. I want to send lots of love and light to all of you guys
That's enough.
in the chat and who's watching this later. This will be available later. If you came in late, please do go back and watch the whole beginning of it. And like I mentioned in the very beginning, there's playlists for both Joseph Reyna and for Angela in the videos, other videos they've been in with tons of information, hours of watching. So do enjoy. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.
Bye.